So when you think about it, now that you have the opportunity to do these conferences that were never available online before at a fraction of the cost, I think this information is going to get out to even more people. Plus the fact, when you think about it, to go to a conference, you often go by yourself because it's expensive. You can't take your kids and your husband, right. But doing it online, I mean, you can invite the whole neighborhood. They don't monitor who's in your house when you're watching it.
Are you ready to live the life you deserve? Do you want to feel vibrantly healthy and reach your optimal weight without dieting while being kind to animals and the planet? Then you're in the right place at the right time. Welcome to Plant-Based Eating for Health with your host, certified plant-based nutritionist, Kathleen Gage.
Hey everybody, it's Kathleen Gage with Plant-Based Eating for Health, and today I am so excited to have my featured expert. I don't want to say guest, I'm going to say an expert because I've been a fan of this woman for quite a while. Actually, I have to say she was one of the first people that I found when I did my search on what is it to be a plant-based eater, and it's Chef AJ. Chef AJ has been around the campus for a lot of years, longer than most, 40 years to be exact, and she actually has been on shows like, now we're going to age her here, but I do remember this show, Johnny Carson. She's been on the Jay Leno show. She's been on virtually every show that you can think of, talking about the plant-based lifestyle, compassion to animals, and she has her own TV show. She's got a YouTube show. I mean, this woman is a rock star out there in the plant-based community, but what I really love about her, she's so down to earth, and she is here to just share information that will help you with your plant-based journey. So, Chef AJ, great to have you here.
Well, thank you. And I got to say, I love your hair.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Oh,
it's adorable.
And actually, I love yours.
Well, thank you. Just one correction, 43 years, and I'm proud of it because I actually have an award hanging on the wall. I'm in the Vegan Hall of Fame.
Wow. So, okay, I am going to ask you, how old were you when you went vegan?
Yeah, I was 17. 17. It was September 1st, 1977. I was actually 17 and almost a half. I was leaving home for the first time in Los Angeles to go to the University of Pennsylvania to become a veterinarian. And instead I became a vegetarian and then a vegan.
So you just missed a few letters in there. So how did you go from heading out to be a veterinarian to actually becoming a vegetarian and then a plant-based enthusiast?
Yeah, I didn't plan my life exactly the way it turned out, which is great because it turned out great. I was really, that's what I wanted to be, was a veterinarian since I was a very little kid. And that's why I went to the University of Pennsylvania. I always felt like I wanted to be vegan, even though I didn't know the word vegan growing up, but I knew I didn't really want to eat animals. And one of the good things about being an Orthodox Jew, which I grew up being, I'm just kind of more non-denominational now in my leanings. I'm not really religious, I'm more spiritual, is that you're exposed to far fewer types of animal flesh, which is a really good thing because people develop taste preferences for what they habitually eat. And one of my areas of expertise and focus is food addiction. And if you've never had a food, you're not going to ever get addicted to it. If you never smoked a cigarette or drank a glass of alcohol, you're not going to get addicted to those. And so I never really developed a taste for animal flesh because there wasn't that much that we could eat that was kosher. So for example, when you're kosher, you never mix milk with meat. So I never had things like pepperoni pizza. I never had things like a cheeseburger. I never had bacon or pork chops or ribs or crab or clams or oysters or lobster. These are things that shrimp that some people find delicious, right? I mean, what did you eat as an Orthodox Jew? You had some fish, which by the way, even when I ate fish, I didn't like fish. I mean, anything that had the head on or that I could not eat fish. Maybe some canned tuna as a little kid, but I just wouldn't put that in my mouth because like fish really looks like the animal, doesn't it? It's not like ground beef where you can pretend. I mean, a fish looks like a fish. And when it's on your plate, it's got the head and it's got the bones and all that. Like even when we ate, a traditional Jewish thing like lox and bagels and cream cheese, I just skipped the lox and put on the cream cheese and the onion and the tomato, which you can still do today. And it's quite delicious, by the way. And so and even when you ate meat as an Orthodox Jew, it had to be killed a certain way, and there was only certain cuts available to you. So, so we had a little meat, a little chicken, and, that's all I really remember and I didn't really care for it. I always had to have it burned beyond recognition to eat it. Like I always had to have the end piece, like so that if it had any red in it or blood, I mean, I was just disgusted. And I knew I wanted to not eat animals, but when you're little and you don't drive and you don't have money, it's not as easy, right? And my mom was not mean. It's just that, she really believed, like so many people still believe, that if you don't eat dead animals, you're not going to get protein. And, I was born in 1960. I'm 60 years old. We didn't have the internet back then. We didn't have, well, Dr. Neil Barnard was alive, but he was probably 5 years old, so he couldn't help me, right? So I say that because, I never developed such a taste for animals in the first place, but I always had a compassion for animals, because I had recently just interviewed an Orthodox rabbi on my show. In Judaism, there are some ethics as far as being kind to animals or not mistreating animals. And so, for example, like we grew up knowing that you do not hunt, and like hunting is a sport to many people in the world.
Right.
And as a Jew, Jews do not hunt. It's not an option. It's not something you do for fun. We don't hunt. We do not wear fur coats. Now, I never understood why we were allowed to wear leather, but it was interesting because on a Jewish holiday called Yom Kippur, there was no leather to be worn. So there was some, maybe discrepancies, but there was some areas of compassion in it that I really liked. And I love that, we, for the most part, yes, we ate animals, but we never went out of our way to hurt them by things like hunting and trapping them for fur, things like that. And so when I went to the University of Pennsylvania to be a veterinarian, I was assigned to work for a veterinarian, because that's how I was on scholarship, and that's what you did. It was part of the work study program. And it was literally the first day on the job, September 1st, 1977. I think I have the date correct. And he handed me a tank of live salamanders and he said, "Here." And I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "I need you to cut all their heads off." I'm like, "Why?" And he goes, "Well, I'm doing protein lens regeneration experiments in the salamander, and I just need the lens to do that." And I did not want to do that, believe me. You have that white coat syndrome. You see the guy in the white coat telling you what to do, and you kind of panic. And I'm thinking, God, if I don't do it, I'm going to lose my job, and then I'm going to lose my scholarship. I'm not thinking about the animal at that time. But I remember, like, when I was little and my relatives took me out on a deep sea fishing boat, I just couldn't even fish. It was so disgusting to me, the idea of taking a live worm and killing it just to kill something. So I never liked any of that stuff. I am terrified of bugs, just so you know. And I live in the desert now, and there's scorpions and there's snakes and there's black widow spiders. And as terrified as I am, I can't kill them. It's just in me, So I did it to one salamander, and it was just like, I puked my guts out. I'm like, how can you do this? And I went to the student health center, and I just said, I can't do this. And so they put me in the equipment room, where I then washed the labware for the rest of the semester. And then I never became a veterinarian, because it was gotten worse. They wanted you to dissect frogs and cats. And this was before PCRM and PETA. So there was nobody to say, "No, that's unnecessary. That's stupid. She has the right not to do it." So basically, if you didn't do it, you'd get an F. And so I did get an F, and I basically flunked out of an Ivy League school because of my ethics. Today, somebody would have been the champion for me to make sure that didn't happen. But that's kind of how I became a vegan, an accidental vegan in a way.
I love that, the accidental vegan. So when did you start getting into cooking and becoming a chef?
I got into cooking when I was 7. I got to tell you, for Hanukkah, one year I got the Easy Bake Oven. And I was the fat kid, and I loved dessert, and I especially loved, baking. And this Easy Bake Oven was so cool because I could not figure out how a light bulb could make a cake. Because basically it did. Like you had these little packets, and you mix them with water, and you put it in, and it made a cake. So I always I just like making things. I was not an only child, but my brothers and sisters were all 6, 8, and 10 years older than me. So I was like the annoying little kid that nobody wanted to play with. So my mom would always give me things to make me creative. Like I remember she'd give me a shoebox and a pair of scissors, or she'd give me a strawberry carton. She goes, "Hey, just make something." And so to me, that's what cooking is. It's you're making something. And so I got into cooking when I was 7. And then what happened is my love of cooking really developed when I was 11, when I was sent to California to live with an aunt and uncle, because my parents were having trouble selling the house in Chicago. After, Martin Luther King was shot. It was like a lot of real tensions, just like today, but it was 1970. And my aunt was Swiss, and her mother was a cordon bleu chef and had a restaurant in Switzerland. She didn't speak any English. She spoke French, but every day she would make like an amazing meal, like in a restaurant. And I just loved watching her. Her name was Maymay, and she didn't use any recipes. And she literally would make stuff up with whatever was there. Like she would take a pear, and then all of a sudden there would be a pear galette, and she would take leeks. Like, what kind of 11-year-old kid loves leeks? Well, I did, because she just made magic out of food, and real food, by the way. You know, they didn't eat I mean, yes, they had some bread and flour in the house, but for the most part, my aunt and uncle did not eat processed food. They ate animal products like most people did, but they ate actual food, and they made magic with it. So it always was like, wow, this is so cool. You take this, you make this, and it's delicious. Never actually thought I wanted to be a chef, but I always loved playing with food and making up recipes. And that's one of the funnest things.
So how did you transition from being an 11-year-old, learning from Mimi, and then moving into like becoming a world-renowned chef and being on all the top shows?
Well, I don't know if I'm a world-renowned chef. Thank you.
I would say you are,
but
yes.
You know, I'm a pretty good pastry chef. I will say that, because I did work for 5 years in a restaurant as a pastry chef. I never got into the executive chef world, only because that required math. I am so bad at math, and the business classes in culinary school were just like, they were so boring and so over my head. And I really respect people like Chef Ramses Bravo at True North and Chef Eric Tucker, the ones that can run restaurants and centers, because there's a lot of math involved when you're cooking for multiple people and figuring things out. Pastry chef, there's not a lot of math, because basically you have the recipes that you're going to make, and the owner says, I need this many German chocolate cakes. It's not hard, you know. It's not scaling it the way you are trying to figure out food. And so, yeah, I think I'm a good pastry chef, especially considering that I don't use refined sugar, oil, or salt. And really, I think only one of my recipes even has flour. But I think what happened is again, I didn't intend to be a chef. What happened is I intended to heal myself of colon cancer naturally. And when I was 43 years old, even though I had been vegan for 26 years, I was obese, almost 20 pounds, almost 200 pounds, 20 pounds. That would be funny. And I had the beginning of colon cancer. I was bleeding internally. And I went, when I had they didn't do a colonoscopy, they did a sigmoidoscopy, and they said that my colon was riddled with adenomatous polyps, that if they didn't remove them, they would turn into cancer.
Right.
And they couldn't remove them during the procedure because my colon was, they said, dirty. And even with the prep, I just, after 43 years of basically eating processed junk food, vegan food, Slurpees, Dr. Peppers, and no fruits and vegetables, they couldn't remove the polyps. But they took pictures of them, and they knew the size, and they knew the location. And they said, well, we can't get rid of these, so you're going to have to come back and have surgery. And I panicked, because when I was 19 years old, I had what was supposed to be a same-day operation. I became allergic to the anesthetic and ended up in the hospital for 6 weeks. And I remember I was almost put on a ventilator. And that's why this whole thing with COVID, what scares me the most is being an asthmatic and having had that happen. I mean, I used to be a respiratory therapist, and I don't want to say always, but very often when people get on ventilators, they have a hard time coming off ventilators. And I remember waking up in the recovery room, not breathing, and them calling a code. Was it a code blue? I forgot what it is when it's just not breathing.
I think it's code blue. Well,
I don't think is it blue when it's not, when it's respiratory arrest. That just shows you how long. It was over 40 years ago. And I remember seeing him, his name was Harvey, my coworker, with the Ambu bag. And then they had the intubation tube. And I'm like, finally I started breathing. But the reason I'm saying this is I really developed trauma, PTSD from that, and became so afraid of medical procedures and anesthesia that I even stopped going to the dentist. I got so scared. And so when he said surgery, I'm like, unless I'm in a car accident and I can't sign and you're going to save my life, I'm not having surgery. I'm just that afraid. And so I went to a place called the Optimum Health Institute on Sunday, July 6, 2003, a day that will live in infamy. And I probably would have gone to True North, but this was before internet, or at least before I had the internet. So I had heard about the Optimum Health Institute for a couple of people, and it was very, very affordable. It still is very affordable. And I went there for a week. And I remember I took the train from LA to San Diego, and I had the cab driver take me to 7-Eleven before I got dropped off, because I had heard that if you're caught with any contraband, they kick you out and they don't give you your money back. And so I had a Coke Slurpee and a 7-Eleven, and I was drinking them both before I got in. And then I went there, and it was an incredible experience, because it was all these people there that were healing of diseases that they were told were incurable. People had AIDS and lupus and Lyme's disease and brain cancer. And they would come back every Friday and give testimonials how eating a whole food plant-based diet. And in this case, it was raw and it was without sugar, oil, or salt, or flour, of course, alcohol or chocolate, things like that, had cured them of these diseases. And it was very inspiring because I thought, well, I don't even have actual cancer yet. I have what they were calling pre-cancer. And I said, if these people can recover from these very serious diseases, then why wouldn't I be able to recover from the diseases that I had? And so I went to the Optimum Health Institute, and sure enough, I did recover, because within 6 months, when I went back to have another sigmoidoscopy, it was the same GI doctor doing it. And he said, where did you go to have the surgery? And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he goes, well, all the polyps are gone. Your colon is clean, clear, pink, and vascular like a newborn baby. And where did you have the surgery done? I said, well, I didn't have surgery. I just changed my diet. And he goes, well, that's impossible. And the assisting GI doctor, once he left, she said, I believe you. And I'm like, whoa. So I went to culinary school, not to be a chef, but because I couldn't sustain what I was eating on the Optimum Health diet for 6 months, which was pretty austere and draconian. It was, look, a raw food diet can be a lot more delicious than what I was eating. And I don't believe it. You even have to necessarily be 100% raw to heal. Mm-hmm. I was just eating a terrible diet. If I would have gone just on the McDougall diet, I would have probably healed too. I'm pretty sure I would have. Mm-hmm. But raw food is very healing. And so I was eating lots of, green juices and smoothies, but without the sugar, oil, flour, salt, no processed food. But I couldn't sustain it because, well, first of all, I was always cold when I ate a raw food diet. And when you ask me how the weather is, it's 116, and I'm like, it's fine. I am loving the hot weather. But so that's why I went to culinary school, was because, for a while I signed up for this raw food delivery service that doesn't exist, but that was very, very expensive after a while. I said, look, if I'm going to eat healthy the rest of my life, I'm going to have to learn how to prepare food so that it tastes a little bit better than these sprouts and what I was eating. So I never really intended to become a chef. And, but once I went to culinary school, then I was excited, and I'm like, well, gosh, I really would like to have the experience of working in a restaurant, but I really couldn't afford to, because when, the restaurant, unless you like are Wolfgang Puck, or, that's not like you don't go into chefing generally to make your fortune. And I was making more money at my other job, which was as an activity director at a retirement home. And it's like, I had to have that job just so that I could afford working as a chef, because coming out of culinary school, they wanted to pay like $8-10 an hour, $12 an hour. I was making more than double that at my corporate job, right? So I finally found a place that would pay me, $15 an hour, which still is, not that great. If you have a house in LA, it's not, you're under the poverty line. But I wanted that experience, and it was fun working at a restaurant because I got to create a lot of recipes. And also what I liked about it is, as a pastry chef, I didn't have to worry if, I think in the 5 years I was there, somebody returned one dessert. And I think it's because it was a frozen dessert and it had freezer burn. Whereas, when you're a regular chef, people are hungry. By the time they get to dessert, they're not as hungry. So they're not as impatient. And I think people are more forgiving. Like if you run out of one dessert, there's always another. So if there was no stress for me involved in being a pastry chef, like I think it would have been as an executive chef, where you've got to get that food out and they're waiting, the desserts, they don't wait. They're already ready,
Right. Well, it's interesting because I also was pre-cancerous with pre-cancerous colon cancer, and that still wasn't enough for me. It's like I quit smoking 25 years ago because I had a threat with breast cancer and a heart attack at the age of 40. And so it's been 26 years. And then a few years ago, they found the polyps, and my doctor's like, you really got to change some things in your life. And it took a little bit more for me to finally get that it was time to change. And it was actually inflammation that started me on the journey of plant-based eating. And what's so interesting is that I do animal rescue, and I actually have worked a lot within the pet industry. Conference speaker, consultant, all of that. And I didn't connect the dots between here I am saving animals, working with people who work with animals, and I'm eating them, because I grew up with a European mother who we had big roasts on Sundays, and the rarer the better. And it was like everybody fought for that rare piece of meat. And now I can't even imagine. It's like that's the furthest thing from my reality now, which really leads into the whole question of when you are talking with people who they want to go plant-based or they want to go vegan and they want to do it the healthy way. And yet they're getting pushback from their family, but their health is suffering. Maybe they're pre-diabetic or diabetic. Maybe they have high blood pressure, heart conditions, polyps, whatever it may be. And they know that the change will be good for them, yet their family is making fun of them. They're saying, oh, that's ridiculous. You're off on one of those crazy tangents. How do you address that?
I address that by sending them to the experts. And those experts are Dr. Doug Lisle and Dr. Jen Hawk. They have a podcast called the Beat Your Genes podcast that airs every Wednesday night, but they also have a website, esteemdynamics.com, and they do private sessions. I'm not a psychologist, and I can't really help people with that other than to tell them one of the things they can do. They don't want to make a session with one of these psychologists for $75 is to read the book called The Pleasure Trap, chapter 4, yes. Because Dr. Lisle gives some great advice in the chapter called Getting Along Without Going Along. And he helps people navigate these difficult social situations based on the personalities of the parties involved. That's why I can't just give you a blanket statement, do this, because you have a different personality than me, and the people that you're interacting with have different personalities. And this is what Dr. Lisle is an expert in. He has a free lecture on his website called The Perfect Personality that can help you understand that. But for me, I just buy a $7.99 pen on Amazon. If somebody tries to get me to do something I don't want to do, I just go,
stop.
Yeah, but see, then again, but I have a different personality, and what works for me isn't going to work for other people. That's why I could say, well, just tell them not to do that. The truth is the people that are having the pushback are probably very agreeable people. And this is why it's important to know your personality. And this is what Dr. Lisle can help you with. If you are an agreeable person, you cannot change your personality. You're not going to be able to do it. I'm disagreeable. It's easier for me. But what you can change is your environment to help you support it. And then this is where Dr. Lisle can really come in and give you like scripts, like things you can do. The truth is if your life really depends on changing your diet, you know, I don't understand why loving family members and friends wouldn't support you. But then again, you know, I haven't had that kind of pushback in my life, so I'm not the best one to ask.
Right.
But you know, you have to eat as if your life depends on it, because it just might.
Absolutely. Now, you created a program, and actually before we talk about your ultimate weight loss program that you've created, I want people to know you're listening to Plant-Based Eating for Health podcast show with Chef AJ is my featured expert today. This is Kathleen Gage, and we're just like digging into all different areas of the plant-based lifestyle. And I know that you created the ultimate weight loss program. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so in 2000, I think it was, was it 2014 or so? I did a conference in where was it? Topanga, California, called the Ultimate Weight Loss Conference. And it was very popular, and people wanted to have some kind of continuation and group support, because we had actually filmed it with my partner in the Ultimate Weight Loss program, a fitness expert, vegan for almost as long as I'm, John Pierre, be a great guest, by the way. And so we sold the conference, the recordings, both audio and video, and then we created group support. And we realized that there was a lot of people that needed that group support that couldn't do it on their own, just, you know, give them a book or a diet. And so it really did actually help a lot of people. It was very, very gratifying to see it. Before even that happened, I was doing it at home. So I had an apartment in Sherman Oaks, and this, I was probably doing it since almost 2008, where I did it probably 3 or 4 times a year. I would have people come to my home. I taught cooking classes in my home every month. And so people would want to have some kind of next step. And I would have this program that I called the Ultimate Weight Loss Program that ran over a 4-week period, usually on a Saturday night, sometimes on a Sunday. They started at 4 o'clock. We'd do some yoga. We'd have dinner, and I would show them how to make the food. And then I'd have some kind of lecture. And then I would Skype in another expert like a Dr. McDougall or Dr. Lisle or Dr. Goldhammer. And people had just tremendous results just with this 4-week in-person program, where we were connected every day by email, and they got the food and they got the education, they got the group support, and people lost tremendous amounts of weight. Like one of my star pupils, Shada Soleimani, it's been 8 years now, she took off 120 pounds, more than I weigh, and she's kept it off. And so that's how that started, because realizing that if you could have done it alone, you probably would have. And there's some people that can. Again, it goes back to your personality. Introverts have a lot easier time than people that are extroverted that seem to need other people for these kind of things. And so that was very nice. And then I wrote a book based on the program. So you know, for like 1/10 the price of the program, you can get the book, or even cheaper on Kindle, and just figure out how to do it yourself.
Okay. And now, how can people find you? They book
Well,
you on
honestly, if you
Amazon?
Google Chef AJ, you'll get a lot
We're
of
all over the
information, but
place.
I'm probably most active on YouTube right now because since the sheltering in place began, which I believe was about March 20th in my state, I started going live every day on both YouTube and Facebook just to kind of connect with my community,
Mhm.
which has grown since then. And I realized I couldn't do it by myself because I was getting sick of hearing myself talk. So I asked all my friends, and I'm making a lot of new friends. So I've been going live once a day at 11 a.m. Pacific time on both YouTube and Facebook doing what I call Chef AJ Live. And it's been amazing because I don't only just get the wonderful superstars like the Dr. Gregors and the Dr. McDougals, but people that people may not have heard of are coming on the show and doing cooking demos. And it's just a great way to connect. And that's really, then you can, if you don't get sick of me, you can see me every day for an hour from 11 a.m. till noon Pacific time, ask questions, and meet another wonderful community of people that pretty much tune in every day that are making friends with each other.
Awesome. And we'll make sure to put those links below in the description and the show notes. And speaking of community, where do you see things going with it? Because of the shelter in place, a lot of people are reaching out via Zoom and lives and Facebook and LinkedIn. Where do you see all of this going with the plant-based vegan movement as we move forward? And what I really want to dig into also is the whole health benefit of the underlying causes that cause the complications with COVID. So let's start with the community and where you see it going, let's say 5 years down the road.
Well, I cannot predict, other than I can tell you that I think in a lot of ways, being disconnected has made us more connected.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand that people, especially people that are extroverts that like that in person, hugging and whatever, they're not very happy with this. But by and large, I feel that I have been more connected to friends and family since this happened than before, because there's no option to see them any other way. And so we're actually making the effort to do Skypes and Zooms and FaceTimes and more phone calls. So that's number one. And plus, like I had a meetup group that would meet once a month through a potluck, which they're not allowing right now. And, obviously we can't share the food on this kind of medium, but we can still connect. And so I'm actually busier than ever teaching more courses. All of the wonderful plant-based conferences are online,
Mm-hmm.
which actually makes them more affordable, more accessible to people. Because when you think about it, yes, of course, it's great connecting in person. You get to hug people, meet them, and share the food. Some of these conferences can be quite expensive. And when you think about it, it's not just the price of the conference, because I know I've done 19 conferences myself as a producer. It's not just the price of the conference, which when it seems expensive, trust me, we don't make anything on conferences. Hotels really they're the ones that are making the money. But you have to take the time off work. You have to get on an airplane, which is another great expense to fly there. You need the hotel. So when you think about it, now that you have the opportunity to do these conferences that were never available online before at a fraction of the cost, I think this information is going to get out to even more people. Plus the fact, when you think about it, to go to a conference, you often go by yourself because it's expensive. You can't take your kids and your husband, but doing it online, I mean, you can invite the whole neighborhood. They don't monitor who's in your house when you're watching it. So I think that in a way, it's a good thing that it's not a good thing that this has happened. That's not what I mean. It's a good thing that this has happened, meaning the people reaching out on Zoom, doing shows, doing conferences, because they're reaching people either, in my case, like my show is free, or these conferences, which, like I said, would be maybe $500 in person, but online it's like $97, and it's for the whole family. So that's one thing I see. With one of the other thing I think I see that's happening, which is really good, and this is especially good for people that have been trying to lose weight and have been unsuccessful, is, of course, I don't want to see the restaurant industry, go under.
Right.
And that's not my intention. However, I do know for people that are struggling to lose weight, that are food addicts, restaurant eating often doesn't support them. And for the very first time, I'm hearing for clients that could never lose weight, but are losing weight now just because they're not going to restaurants. So that tells you something about that. And people are now learning to cook, falling in love with cooking, realizing that, because, at the beginning it was hard to get the kind of food you wanted. We were told, maybe be afraid to go to stores. So people are learning to cook. They're realizing that if you have an Instant Pot and an air fryer, it's not rocket science. It can be fun, that you can have really delicious, healthy food at a fraction of the cost for eating out. So again, I'm not minimizing the damage of this pandemic.
Right,
I'm
right.
very sorry about the people that, I mean, trust me, that's not what I'm saying, but I have always been the person that likes to make lemons out of lemonade. It is what it is. We can't change it right now. So I go to, well, what can we do to improve what's good about it? I remember I was 4 years old, and my great grandmother had diabetes and she had to get her leg amputated. And I remember saying, well, you don't have to shave that leg now. And I wasn't trying to be funny or facetious. That's how my brain works. I can't change the pandemic or the laws, but I can try to make life better for the people right now. And that's what I do through my shows, through education. Right. So that's, I think you had one more question about what was the,
just the underlying causes. That
it's funny because I just finished interviewing Dr. Scott Stoll, and one of the things we were saying is, because we're all promoting a whole food plant-based diet, one of the things that's not being talked about very much, except for, I know Bill Maher had a funny piece on it, or maybe it wasn't meant to be funny, but it was, is we wouldn't have pandemics if it wasn't for animals. There has been no pandemic that didn't have a zoonotic start. There were no pandemics before we started eating animals and caging them and putting them in small spaces with, it just, and people are just like, oh, I don't know, let's get a vaccine. Well, we need a vaccine against stupidity because people are not realizing that's the
We're
vaccine.
calling this show a vaccine against stupidity.
Yeah, well, because with all due respect, we have to look at where this pandemic came from. I mean, in my opinion, people shouldn't be eating animals, period. Unless, of course, there's extraordinary circumstances. I don't want to get, I don't know, the Inuits or where places where there's nothing else available. But if you live in the United States, you can eat rice and beans instead. And even if you are eating animals, there's no reason to eat as many animals as you are. And then there's no reason to eat the kind of animals that they're eating at these wet markets. That's just wrong. That's disgusting. I mean, not that it's any better to eat cows and things in my opinion, but at least there are a little bit of laws, hopefully, that are surrounding the slaughter of those animals. I mean, I think, I love Dr. Greger's book, How to Survive a Pandemic. We need to shine the spotlight on what is causing these pandemics in the first place. It's not because we're, resistant to or not, to these viruses. It's because people are eating animals. Wake up and understand, where this came from. And I believe there's a chapter in The Pleasure Trap as well that talks about the history of pandemics, which all started once we started eating animals, or at least, it's different when, in the old days, you found a bird, you shot it. That's our ancestors did eat some animal products, but not the way they're being raised today. And to me, I think it's just, I hate to say this because people are not going to like it, but, I think it's the Hare Krishna faith that says something like that, because they're against eating animals. And they say, when you eat the cow comes back and gives you a disease like heart disease or things like that. And I think it's, it's retribution. You're not supposed to be eating bats, people. They're mammals. Mammals don't eat mammals.
Absolutely. And it's so interesting because that's been my big frustration. And I've blogged a lot about it, let's look at the real causes of the complication. I saw there was an article about a 16-year-old boy that went into the hospital in the morning, died in the afternoon. And the headline was, "A healthy young man dies of COVID." And his picture it was very obvious he was at least 100 to 150 pounds overweight. And I blasted that. It's like, come on, let's be real. Let's give people the right information so they can make better decisions. Because unfortunately, people would rather put a Band-Aid on the whole situation than get to the root of it. And it really does go into all the animal-based products that we're eating. What do you find is, with all that you're doing, what's your greatest pleasure in the fact that you're such an influencer in the whole movement of plant-based eating?
Right now, right now, I love that I'm discovering undiscovered talent through my show, that I'm putting a spotlight on people that maybe wouldn't have gotten the chances to go to the kind of conferences and cruises that I went to, but they're equally as engaging, endearing, creative, featuring chefs that people, that's doing my heart good because, I got to pass the torch to somebody. First of all, I'm 60, I'm going to die one day, but also I probably want to retire one day. And so I love that I look at my roster of these people that I have coming up, and it's like I feel like the person that discovered Lana Turner at the Schwab's soda fountain counter, because I have found these people that nobody has heard of, and and it's like they get to be on the show, and then people are now, they're growing their list, and they're getting, speaking jobs. And so for me right now, because I remember what it was like starting out, and it wasn't easy. And if it wasn't for Dr. McDougall, I don't know if anybody would know who I am, because he gave me my first job basically. And so that's giving me a lot of pleasure right now to untap, to tap into these undiscovered talents and people that people don't know about, and they should. And that's kind of how I start my show. I say, this is a show where I introduce you to amazing people like you who are doing great things in the world that I think you should know about. Everybody knows about all the plant-based superstars, but there's more people that are doing good on a daily basis, whether it's somebody that's volunteering for a farm sanctuary in some small town, or somebody that created a vegan product, or a vegan skincare, and it's all important. And so I mean, at this rate, I could probably do the show the rest of my life. That's how many people there are, because I'm so booked up, because people write me to be on the show. And basically, if you're a good person, you're vegan, and you're doing something to forward this message and help animals,
That's awesome.
I want people to know about you. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, tell us a little more about your show. Let's talk about some of the episodes, and what can people expect when they tune into your show. 11 a.m. Pacific. YouTube,
Pacific time. And sometimes there's a double episode like today, because certain doctors, or especially in time zones, can't do 11. So that's why if you are interested at all, please consider subscribing to me on YouTube, clicking that little notification bell. But by and large, this is incredible, because since it started on March 20th, I have not missed a day where I haven't gone live at least once or twice a day, sometimes as much as 3 and 4. And it's funny how it started, because, it's like it's almost like one of the things I was looking back on my life, and I love turning pain into purpose. And so what happened is before the governor told us to shelter in the state of California, March 20th, it was about 2 or 3 weeks before that where he didn't enforce it, but he recommended that anyone over 65 electively shelter. Well, I live in the Coachella Valley near Palm Springs. It's a very older community. I live in a 55 and over community. And in my meetup group, many of the people were in their 60s, 70s, and 80s. And I felt very bad that they had no connection. And we were told we really weren't supposed to visit them, that we could be putting them at risk. And I'm thinking, how am I going to connect with these people? So one of the things I started doing was playing Words with Friends with them, even though I know it's a highly addictive game, but I was trying to find a way to connect with the people that were over 65. And so I started to go live, and I thought I was going live to my group, but I'm not very good at technology, and I didn't push the right button. And I found out that I was live on Facebook and YouTube at the same time. I wasn't just live on my group. And it turned out there was a lot of people watching, especially at the beginning. And they were thanking me, because people get so obsessed with the news, and they're watching it 24 hours a day. And this was like 1 hour a day where we could, not that we were diminishing COVID, we did have guests on talking about it, but it was just something like a bright spot in the day. And so I started doing it, and then more and more people contacting me to be on the show, so much so that I'm booked to almost the end of the year now. Wow. And I'm doing the show, and it turned out really great, because I love it because it's free. I mean, yes, there are a couple of commercials on YouTube. Oh, well, but I mean, if somebody has access to a computer or a phone, I've done many things in my life that weren't free, conferences. And since this happened, we decided not to sell any of our stuff because of what's going on. But this was something I could do that took my time, but it doesn't cost anybody any money to participate. So what's happened is the people that started watching live, they became a community, and they're looking out for each other. They're making friends. They're almost taking roll every day. And plus the fact that I'm getting to meet a lot of people and talk about things in different areas. So of course, you need to have the superstars like the Furmans and the McDougalls and the Gregors and the Barnards, and on your show to get ratings and get people to watch. But some of the shows that got just amazing feedback, and maybe weren't a lot of live viewers, but they picked up, like, for example, what I'm going to remember is I'm not a crier for the most part. I mean, I guess I am if a movie's sad, but I try not to cry too much because I just don't like it. But the 3 shows where I cried, and because that's how moved I was by the people. One, I was interviewing a vegan with brain cancer, Sarah Taylor, who's a vegan author. But the reason I cried wasn't so much that she had brain cancer, which of course is sad, but the outlook in this individual. It was just like that show is a must see, phenomenal. This person is thriving with brain cancer, and it could be terminal. And so she's chosen to live every day. And then another show was Rabbi Shmuley, an Orthodox rabbi. And like, if you could, the compassion that came out of the screen was like, he moved me so much that I ended up crying, just because I was so moved by who he was and what he did with the world. And most recently, and again, not everybody has to be 100% vegan to be on my show. They have to be 100% a good person. I interviewed Elaine LaLanne, the wife of Jack LaLanne, and just the way the example she set for living your life at 94, exercising every day. She's writing books. I mean, I used to work in a retirement home, and people would give up at 70, you know, and so I get inspired. I mean, I want people to lift other people up, but they're lifting me up. And it's just been the most incredible experience, because I had my own TV show once, which was ridiculously expensive, and I made no money for, and I had to travel to New York and do all this stuff. And here I get to work at home, meet the most amazing people, make a difference in the life of some of the people that watch it, because that's what they tell me, and have a lot of fun doing it.
Absolutely. And you know that people will go look at your website, they'll go to Amazon, and they'll get your products without you having to sell it. Because, you know, that's actually when I work with people, I'm a marketing consultant, and I say, just get your back end set up, give great value, and people will search out your stuff. Don't worry about it. Now, speaking of great stuff, if you had only one tool that you could have in your kitchen, and that was the only tool, what would it be?
Oh God, you're asking me if I could only have one internal organ in my body, which would I choose? I mean, 3 came to mind immediately, which was my brain went to Instant Pot, air fryer, and Vitamix.
Okay.
But if I can only have one, I'm going to have to go with the Instant Pot, because it makes my life easier.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Yeah.
And I just have to say that this has been delightful. I've been talking with Chef AJ, and Chef AJ is out there rocking it, and she has her live program at 11 a.m. Pacific on YouTube. We'll make sure to put the link. And Chef AJ, in closing, what are your final thoughts for people out there who really want to have a quality of life, and they want to have the kind of energy that you have, and, you know, moving into their 60s? I just turned 66, and I'm running a 10K this weekend. It's my first race in quite a while because of the shutdown, and I'm hoping they won't shut it down. But, you know, with plant-based living, we live a vibrant life. So what are your closing thoughts?
Wow. Boy, that's a good one. So, you know, I want to talk to the people that aren't having the quality of life right now. And I want to, because people that don't, you know, even watch us maybe. I want to say that it's never too late to have the health and the body you deserve. I really believe that. I've worked with people in their 90s who have changed their diets. What you eat matters profoundly. Don't listen to your doctor unless it's a plant-based doctor who says, oh, you have stomach cancer. It doesn't matter what you eat. What you eat matters. Every bite, morsel, crumb that you put in your mouth either moves you towards health or moves you towards disease. And that's just the way it is. And it's cumulative though. So a lot of people I'm hosting this GI health summit, and I'm asking the doctors, why is there so much, you know, ill health in GI? Because it's cumulative. People don't eat, you know, one cheeseburger and have a heart attack or get, you know, inflammatory bowel disease. What you eat your whole life accumulates over time that creates the body that you have today. So you can rewind the clock, but just not immediately. So really what you eat matters. You got to eat vegetables. I mean, that's the thing I didn't do for 43 years. You got to eat vegetables. You don't have to like them, but you got to eat a lot of starch too. So really just to know that what you eat can make a profound difference on how you look, how you feel, what diseases you get, and what diseases you can reverse. And you can learn to love the healthiest version of a plant-based diet. It just does take some time.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, it's been delightful, Chef AJ. Thank you so much. This is Kathleen Gage with Plant-Based Eating for Health podcast show. And be sure to subscribe, hit the like button, and we'll see you in the healthy avenue of life.
Thank you for your commitment to an ethical life through plant-based food choices. The kind of choices that are kind to your body, the environment, and most of all, animals. Be sure to leave a review and rating of the Plant-Based Eating for Health podcast show.